What up, people? It's your boy Chig from Gooner Eagle Eye talking to you again. I'm bringing you another video. I wanted to do something a little bit different, a little bit something personal to me, because I think I have subscribers that probably just log on to me and they think, flip me, you're miserable. You know, you always talk about something which is going wrong, or you always make critiques, and you don't talk enough about the good things about football. And I think the time away from Arsenal as we go through this pandemic that we're going through, it gives you a time for self-reflection. It gives you an opportunity to understand why it is that you miss football, why it is that you miss Arsenal, and the good times that football brought to you. And I think we as Arsenal fans often forget about the good times because it's been so long, to be blunt, since we've had them. But I think just because it's been so long doesn't mean that we should necessarily reflect or we should necessarily lose touch of the reasons why we love football. So I saw something going around on Twitter yesterday, and shout out to Mr. DJ who involved me on that. And I thought to myself, you know what, that would be a really good video and give you guys an opportunity to know me a little bit better. So I'm going to talk to you about my 5 footballing heroes. And we're going to start in descending order. I think that's the right expression. So let's start with number 5, Big Patrick Vieira. Patrick Vieira, the 6'4" towering Frenchman who joined Arsenal in 1996. And wow, was it a hell of a signing or what? He joined and instantly he became a presence in the midfield. And I remember at the time, it was seen as quite a bit of a controversial signing. I think people were thinking to themselves, because it was one of Wenger's first signings for a start. And I think people were thinking, Patrick Vieira, right? And I remember at the time there was a lot of noise about whether he was going to be a good signing, and you know, he was seen as a bit of a risky signing as well. But it was one of Wenger's very early successes. He went and bought this 6'4" big black guy in midfield, and who became perhaps one of the Premier League's best central midfielders. In a lot of people's eyes, one of the best central midfielders ever, alongside perhaps his bitter rival in Mr. Roy Keane. And him and Patrick Vieira, boy, was that a battle. And it's one of the main reasons that I hate Man United even today, because I grew up on it. I grew up on that. You know, if you technically think about it, when he signed, I was 11 years old. And that's all I've ever really known. It's just the battles in midfield that they had. But actually, he was so much more than the pushing and pulling of Roy Keane, or he was so much more than that. He was a leader. He, to me, exhibited the way I think I would be if I was a captain of a football club. And actually, I was for a little while. Without trying to toot my own horn, but Rago let me toot a couple of times. A lot lighter, admittedly, when I was a lot lighter. I did captain my football team to a few trophies over the years. And I didn't do it necessarily by screaming or shouting. I did it by, you know, being a presence in that in defence where I played. And, you know, leading by example and guiding the young players. And, you know, you kind of, somebody who exhibited, he's one of those sort of people you can tell, and I think people have said it about Patrick in the past, that he wasn't necessarily a screamer, but good luck if you went and tried to go against him. You know, someone that had commanded presence without saying so much, you know, and led by example, and people had the respect around him. And I think that was what, to me, what I exhibited and what I still exhibit as a captain. Don't get me wrong, I think Tony Adams was a brilliant captain in his own right, but he was clearly a screamer and a shouter. John Terry, similar sort of thing. Can't stand the man as a person. He's a racist. There's no doubt about it. Brilliant captain. But with this particular guy, he did it in a slightly different way. It wasn't so much about the screaming and shouting. And don't get me wrong, he could give it to you. But it was more about the way he would carry himself with a lot of dignity, but was ready for the battle. If he needed to scream, he'd scream. If he needed to fight, he'd fight. But more often than not, if he needed to win, he would win. And nothing illustrates that last point more than in that 2005 final. I think we as Arsenal fans truly knew that he was about to leave the club, and he wanted to leave the club, and he was desperate to leave the club. A couple of years before, he'd flirted with Juventus, and I think the following year, he was very close to moving to Real Madrid. And then Juventus came back in for him, and I think we knew that he was destined to go. And the whole team played like crap in that FA Cup final. But I remember feeling so disappointed about the way the season turned out. We'd made top four, but we hadn't really done anything in the league. And it was our opportunity of being able to scrape something. And we left with that FA Cup. And to me, it was almost fitting that Patrick Vieira scored with his last ever kick for Arsenal. Scored a valuable penalty that won us that cup. And that's the man. And we couldn't begrudge him his move afterwards to Juventus. So I think for me, Patrick Vieira was always the guy that I held close to my heart. And I guess, again, someone who, keep in mind, I was 11 when he signed. Someone who, again, looked like me, signed for a club which was the club I loved. Someone who made me realize that maybe dreams can come true. And that's why I'll always have respect for him. So, yeah, for me, Patrick Vieira, absolutely my number 5 pick. Next up, in my opinion, the greatest ever Arsenal player we've ever had. And unfortunately, Thierry, it's not you. It is the non-Flying Dutchman, Dennis Bergkamp, who joined the club in 1995, went on to have 315 appearances, score 87 goals, and leave the club in 2006, where he played his last ever pro game of football. What else can I say other than he was the greatest? For me, he was the greatest. I think scoring goals is all well and good. And let me not diminish or belittle Thierry Henry's achievements, because I think it's always important to remember that, you know, he is our record goal scorer. Again, one of the greatest ever, one of the Premier League's greatest ever. And I think in his own right is quite rightly immortalized, I should say, by Arsenal fans. But let's also just be honest here. The very start of Henry's career, there's a reason he was so successful. And that is largely down to the non-Flying Dutchman, Dennis Bergkamp. He is the blueprint. He is the player that, for some unusual reason, Arsenal fans of today think Mesut Ozil is. No. Even Mesut Ozil will tell you he is nothing compared to Dennis Bergkamp. He is the true artist. Everything he did, just watch certain games, man. Watch that famous game against Newcastle. Watch that famous game against Leicester. And tell me you think Mesut Ozil can even lace this boy's boots. Now 50 years old. I think he's still an assistant manager. Oh no, he's stopped that job now, hasn't he? But a man that will always be an Arsenal legend. Someone who I think, particularly the old school fans of Arsenal, I think, with all due respect to the younger fan base, I think unless you have properly studied him on YouTube and stuff like that, and listen, I'm not even saying that in a flippant way. I guess my version of this would be Rocastle. Rocastle was perhaps was around during a period, RIP, rest in peace to him, was around during a period where I had just started getting into Arsenal and my memories of him aren't as strong. And the only reason I know who he is and the sort of impact and play, and the impact he had in the club and this type of player he was YouTube clips. For me, I don't think there's anything disgraceful about going back, especially if you have a true interest in something, is going back in time and watching YouTube clips and really trying to appreciate the player. And I think those sort of people that, when you do certain Arsenal, 1 to 11 Arsenal teams, and you leave out Dennis Bergkamp from Mesut Ozil, I would strongly advise you go and find a clips of Dennis Bergkamp and then slap yourself on the wrist for ever suggesting that Dennis Bergkamp should be left out in favour of Mesut Ozil. He was the true artist, the person that, even in the twilight of Ian Wright's career, got him a hatful of goals. And that was when, Bruce Rioch had dropped Ian Wright and Arsene Wenger was playing with Ian Wright more, but was starting to phase him out before bringing in Nicolas Anelka in 1997. Even the brief time that Nicolas Anelka was at the club, Dennis Bergkamp and him was a hell of a combination. Bergkamp seemed to like his black fast strikers next to him, because we all know the combination he formed later with a certain Thierry Henry. And for me, he is a big part, a big component of why Thierry was so successful. Thierry Henry, by the way, will tell you that. And I think is underappreciated a lot by younger Arsenal fans. But for me, greatest ever, Dennis Bergkamp. Ian right. Ian right. The reason that I support Arsenal, along with the fact that I live in North London and my favourite colour is red, he was the very first recognisable black man to me that played for Arsenal Football Club. And before somebody says it, yes, I know about Robbie, I know about Rocky Rocastle, but like I said to you earlier, for me, Rocky Rocastle was the first name I remember my mum always talking about, recognizing as a black man and someone who she had an affinity with because of those reasons. But I'll be honest with you, I was very, very young at that time that Rocky Rocastle was playing for the club. Whereas with Ian Wright, he was the first black man that I remember and that I recall and that I idolized because of it. And don't get me wrong, this is not like a kind of a black versus white issue, but I think when you're kind of young and, I'm trying to make myself old, but, growing up in the 90s, racial tensions were very much a thing. And, you used to turn to TV for escapism. And you saw one guy playing in your favourite colour for what then turned out to be your local team. I was naturally drawn to that. And for me, he was just a brilliant player. Always had this massive smile on his face whenever he scored. Could strop a little bit when he didn't. Very expressive on the field. Was an excellent poacher, excellent striker. Great turn of pace, great acceleration. Just knew where that goal was, knew where the back of the net was. And I loved everything about him. And to me, genuinely, I know lots of people can't stand him as a pundit. But I must admit, I would never have that hatred for him because to me, I loved him so much as a player that it does, for me, supersede whenever he says something daft or flip-flops between issues, which, to be honest, he does do as a pundit. But as a player, for me, I had no fault of his. And, you know, it's a shame in the end that he didn't get to work under Wenger because I would have been interested to see what Wenger could have really done with him, particularly when Wenger was good. Wenger did have a couple of years out of him, but I think for me, yes. Dennis Bergkamp was Arsenal's greatest. Yes, Henry is the king. But to me, the person that should never be forgotten is Ian Wright. Ian Wright. Okay. Now, I don't think this will surprise many people because I have said it a few times before. My favourite ever Arsenal player, and yes, number 2 on this list, it will make sense in a minute, but my favourite ever Arsenal player is Nwankwo Kanu. Yeah, that's right, not Nwankwo Kanu. Nwankwo Kanu. Yeah, that's right. Chig is telling you how to pronounce something. The 6'6" Nigerian joined us in 1999 as a allegedly 22-year-old man. I say allegedly because lots of people had suspicions about this man's age. And especially when you look at him now, you think, you're 43? Yeah? So I could definitely understand the suspicion because he looks older than 43. I will say that. And he also joined us when he had a heart problem. But listen, people have a heart problem all the time. It doesn't necessarily matter what age. A little fun fact about this one: when he joined us in 1999, I was on holiday in Nigeria. And funny enough, I was talking to my uncle at the time that, I wish he would join Arsenal because all we were talking about was my number one on this list, who I'll mention in a minute, and this guy. And I was like, I wish these guys would join Arsenal. Right? And then literally, it must have been the next day, as if their ears were burning. Do you know that Kanu's joining Arsenal? I was like, no way. It's like, Kanu's joining Arsenal. I was like, no way. I literally kept screaming, no way. And they gave me a paper, and I think it was on that Nigeria paper that Nwankwo Kanu is joining Arsenal. I was like, what? Screaming my head off. And this isn't one who I think in time people will appreciate what he did. As with, say, for example, Sylvain Walter, this is another one of those type of strikers that I think people appreciate in time. Scored important goals, was always a problem. At 6'6", you're always going to be a problem, especially if you're 6'6" and you can dance with the ball at your feet the way Kanu can. Bags of skill. I mean, if you're African, the goalkeeper could do that shit. Trust me. That's just the way Africans are built. Do you think there is any African goalkeeper out there that actually wanted to be a goalkeeper? Fuck no. So yeah, he, to me, I think, was football. Had every bit of energy, and the only reason he didn't get the plaudits was because at the time, Brazil ran the show when it came to football and skill, and footballers with skill. But let me mark my words, you're talking about someone who, in his own right, is an Olympic gold medalist. I think people forget that. I think it's someone who scored, I think it's been beaten in the end, but scored one of the quickest Premier League hat-tricks in history against Chelsea. I think, and also an invincible. And I think this is another one that I will always say to people will say, what, you only scored 44 goals and had 197 appearances. Cool. Go and see his effects on those games, though. And I think this is one guy who I think we will miss as time goes on, in the sense that I think we'll learn to appreciate just how good he was as time goes on. Crucial. Won 2 titles with us as well. And again, that's another thing that people forget. To me, I love him. I love everything about him. And yes, I'm Nigerian. And yes, I have a little bit of bias. But the whole list is biased. It's my list. My personal list. And for me, an absolute football hero, Arsenal hero of mine is Nwankwo Kanu. Now, if you notice, you probably sat here thinking, why are you looking at a picture of JJ Okocha? I know Chig loves JJ Okocha, but shouldn't this be Arsenal? No. I never told you this is Arsenal. I told you these were 5 of my footballing heroes. And there's a reason I said that. Because there ain't no way I was talking about footballing heroes and not talking about JJ motherfucking Okocha. If you want an example of Nigerian football, you go and put into YouTube JJ Okocha. My man was an absolute genius. Absolute genius. Probably the best of his career was when he played for Fenerbahce. Because he actually has dual nationality. He is a Nigerian, but obviously played in Turkey for a long time and secured citizenship there, and also has a Turkish passport. Little fun fact. Genius of a footballer. I mean, he's Nigerian, but he's somehow Brazilian. He must be, because some of the skill he had. Sheesh. Now, a lot of people will say George Weah is Africa's greatest footballer ever. I won't disagree with you. But I'll be damned if you tell me that this guy's not number 2. He is Nigeria's best ever footballer. By far. Drip swag when he's on that footballing field. Was a central midfielder, and a midfielder that you would just hate to play against. Could absolutely dominate the midfield, could show skill when necessary, but also had a bit of grit to him and didn't get enough credit for that. I think people forget this is the same geezer that played for a Bolton side managed by Sam Allardyce, and he made 14 appearances. Was it 117 appearances, scoring 14 goals for them between 2006. I can't remember when he left. I think it was 2009 or 2008. No, 2009, I believe he left. Oh, I could be wrong. But he joined him in 2006 and absolutely destroyed. I remember a few times Arsenal used to play them and he would destroy whoever came up against him. Fantastic player. Absolutely fantastic player. And actually, for me, it was always up there as a signing that I would have loved Arsenal to make. I get why they didn't, because I think when he joined Bolton in 2006, I believe he was 28. And I think he just started to hit the peak and start to move down in terms of what we could expect out of him. But even for Bolton, I thought he did amazing. But his best football was when he played for Fenerbahce, scored 34 goals in 61 appearances, then moved on to PSG, stayed there for 4 years. Wasn't necessarily as successful for PSG, but made a lot of appearances in that 4 years. I think it was 82 appearances. Before then, securing himself a move to Bolton in the end. I'm wrong. He moved in 2002, didn't he? Yeah, it was 02 to 06, I believe. Oh, I forget. I digress. But to me, I think he was one of Africa's finest products. Exhibit oozed football, oozed swag. And if you're Nigerian, there's no way you don't love JJ Okocha. That's why I almost had to tell Ola off because I saw his list and JJ Okocha wasn't in it. I was like, what? It's like he nearly made it. I'm like, you are crazy. But to me, another one who was also a Super Eagle who was a Golden Eagle. He also won the Olympic Games. And a guy who was just an artist, just in a similar sort of vein to Bergkamp. An absolute, oh, imagine Bergkamp and him in the same team. Oh, gosh. Kind of thing that gives you a football stiffy. But to me, he is my ultimate footballing hero who made me realize really that anything is possible as long as you work hard enough. And you could do it with a little bit of style too. Anyway, you leave in your comments. Who are your top 5 footballing heroes? Leave in the comments below. Open yourself up. Give me a little bit of you. And leave me who your top 5 are, and I will comment, I promise. Right, I guess as hopefully I've done a decent job of editing this because I'm not looking forward to doing this right now. I'm going to put this out for you, and hopefully you guys enjoy this video. If you do, show me some love. Crush that like button, and I'll get back to you. All right, I'm out of here. Take care. Peace.